Welcome to Know Your Insurance. We're here at Allstate with Gary McNealis, and today we're focusing on homeowners insurance. There's a lot to know if you own a home and possibly even if you own property, right? Sure. So thanks for having us back.
Oh, thanks for having me. Today we're gonna break down a bunch of different things on the homeowner policy. So many changes have taken place in the insurance industry, Jeannine, in the last 3-4 years. It's unbelievable, especially in the homeowners. And if you say, how did that all come about? I mean, you just go back to 2011, the end of 2010, when we had all the hailstorms. That's when it became a huge apparent factor that the insurance companies needed to make changes, because how they pay out on claims has really been affected.
So before you talk about the homeowner insurance, why the changes, why obviously should people have homeowners insurance? Because some people feel, nothing's going to happen to my house, and should I get the homeowners insurance? Maybe with cutting back on their finances, that's, insurance is something that sometimes people do take for granted and they cut back on it. So Sure. Why should people have homeowners insurance?
Peace of mind. We've been talking about that every single show, peace of mind. But first of all, anybody with a mortgage has to have it.
Okay.
It's a requirement of a mortgage company because they're going to protect their asset if the house should burn down, if something should happen to it. There's lots more to protect. And we're going to talk about all the coverages. Okay. And I think when we're done with the coverages, people understand why they absolutely need it and that they shouldn't sacrifice. Because people today are saying, okay, I want the lowest possible price. I just want to carry the minimum. I don't need it. I'm tired of paying. And then it comes time, something happens.
Like what if a wire falls down on your property, or a tree,
Yes.
or you talked about hail, or you talk about
what is it that
severe
they have?
wind pulling off parts of your gutters and your shingles.
Yes.
So there's a lot of things that can happen, especially in this area.
I would say once a day I get the question, am I covered?
Oh my gosh.
My neighbor's tree. And you know what? Some of our commercials from Allstate and from other companies,
right.
Prompt this. But, a tree falls on your neighbor's house, tree falls on your house. Are you covered? What happens if it falls on your car? And, they ask all these questions and you say, well, okay, I'm happy to tell you that, it's covered. Or, you might need to make some changes on the policy to make sure that it is covered. But by the end of today, I think everyone should have a pretty good idea of what it is they need to look for. So, in all of our short talking here, this is a good time for them to go and grab their policy.
Right.
And, and look at it. And by the end of the show, they should have a good, clear understanding of the basics of it. And then, get a little bit more in depth by talking to me or talking to their agent.
So maybe once a year, pull out that policy, go over it with your agent, ask your questions then and there to see if anything has changed, which we're going to talk about today, and if anything should be added based on your life or things that have changed in your life over that year.
Absolutely. Okay, so breaking it down, we're going to do a breakdown of coverage.
Okay.
We're going to do what you should look for in your homeowner policy. We're going to talk about the changes and the way insurance companies really end up insuring property, and what can you do to prevent claims. That's a lot to cover in a half hour, but we're sure going to give it our best shot. And you know what? This is a good start to a series of shows on property, because it's not something to be taken lightly. People should truly understand. We spent 2.5 shows on the auto policy. I think we could probably spend 6 shows on the homeowner policy, talking to a lot of different people. But we're going to cover as much as we can and give as much as we can without boring people.
All right, so the first thing we need to talk about is what to look for in your policy.
Well, I think we're going to talk about breakdown first. We want to talk about the coverage, because then it'll lead us to, okay, I understand what they mean, and then we'll talk about what to look for. And I'm sorry to flip it around, but I think it's better to break it down first, okay? The first thing we want to talk about is coverage A, which is dwelling. And everybody that has a homeowner policy or any kind of property policy looks at that. how do you insure the dwelling of your home? That's the building, okay? How do you insure it? So there are a couple different ways to determine how coverage will take place on the dwelling. One would be replacement cost. Replacement cost would be how much does it cost to replace the structure stick for stick the way you had it before the peril, before a fire, before wind damage. So that's the first thing. The second way to determine dwelling coverage would be what they call ACV, actual cash value. And the definition is replacement cost minus depreciation. So if you have a 40-year-old home, you get 40 years of depreciation on that structure. So if it costs $300,000 to replace it, and there's 40 years of depreciation, you may only get, half. And it's a formula, and it's not something you could just come up with quickly. But that formula for actual cash value is out there. People need to know this because actual cash value is out there in determining policies. Many old insurance policies, typically what they call fire policies or fire and extended coverage policies, typically they pay based on replacement with actual cash value. So they need to know that. If they have an old policy, make sure they look for it. Typically newer policies are based on replacement cost, but there's a lot of different formulas there. So now the dwelling coverage, you take what it costs to replace it, the dwelling now. So people say, well, what about my contents? That's something totally different, and we're going to come to that. This is the structure itself. Okay, what's the structure? The framing, the foundation, anything that is attached, okay? Attached
So the
to
windows, the shutters, the roof.
Part of the dwelling.
Is the porch.
The porch, part of the dwelling. As long as it's attached. If you have a garage and it's attached to your home, that's part of the dwelling. If your garage is not attached, then it becomes other structures, total different thing. We're going to talk about that in a couple seconds. But the dwelling is the most important part of it because that's the highest amount of coverage. And today, there's much controversy over how insurance companies determine replacement cost on dwelling. There are now new formulas. Many insurance companies use outside firms. You might hear the company Marshall, Swifts and Beck. It's a highly used company. Why? Because it takes insurance companies off the hook from using their formula, and they use an outside formula, which pretty much the industry is using today. And sometimes it doesn't sound fair to the insured because they're saying, listen, I got a home. You come out here and buy this home for $300,000. It's not about buying the home. It's about replacing it in the event of damage. We insure many homes in the city of Hazleton that the customer may have paid $40,000 for them. But because of the size, that, it could be, the replacement cost could be $300,000. Could be more, depending on size and things like that. And when we come back, we're going to talk about how we break that down. We're going to talk about square footage and some of the things that we consider in the dwelling coverage because it's very important to know how they determine that.
We'll be right back. You're watching Know Your Insurance. We are talking about homeowners insurance right here on SSP TV. Welcome back. You're watching Know Your Insurance. We're here at Allstate with Gary McNealis, and he has two locations, one here in Hazleton and one if you're watching us in Pottsville in the Schuylkill County area. So we'd like to say hello to our viewers in Schuylkill County. So we're going to pick up on homeowners insurance. There is a lot to know. We're breaking down the insurance coverage, and then we're going to tell you what you need to look for in your policies, right?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so dwelling. There's a lot to do and to know about for this dwelling portion of the breakdown of your policy.
I think dwelling's a great thing to break down because this is where most of the questions come in. Why do I have to insure my house for so much? The replacement cost calculator prior to 3 years ago, had about 10 questions. Today, it probably has 40. There's 40 different elements that could go in there, and if not more. But, here's where it starts. What type of structure do you have? Is it framed? Is it, did they build it out of wood? Did they build it out of masonry? How was it built? Second thing that'll be real common is how many square feet is your structure?
Now I have a question about that. When you're looking at your square footage, and some people have what's called a bonus room. If the bonus room is not finished, is that counted as square footage? And if it is finished, is it counted as square footage?
Okay. If the bonus room is considered an outside room, which would mean it has no heat, many companies don't count that because that's considered a patio. They count it, but they count it as something other than the square footage of the property. So it's counted as a less factor.
Because it is assessed.
Right.
So it should be
well,
counted as
then
something.
that's a possibility.
Okay.
Then that's part of the structure. Most of the time when it's attached, and it's closed in,
If it's heated and used, it's considered
the inspector
square footage.
will count that as square footage of the property.
Okay.
That's a real good question because, to determine your square footage, normally you can take your width times your depth, okay, and multiply it by the number of floors you have,
Right.
excluding the basement, and you can come up with your square footage pretty quickly.
What
But
if your
there-
basement is finished and heated?
then that becomes another subject. It's just not above ground square footage normally. But typically your width times your depth, and that'll give you a good idea of what kind of square footage you have. Now, a newer home, a home built after 1940,
Okay.
typically has been built with 2x4s that are of the new nature. Okay, a 2x4 is what an inch and 3/4 by 3.5 inches. Okay, an old 2x4 was 2 inches by 4 inches. So homes built prior to 1940, they use different framing, Jeannine. And the controversy becomes if the home was built prior to 1940 and we have to replace it with like-in-kind materials, the replacement cost is much, much more.
Right.
It's more wood. The availability of studs at real 2x4s, is less, and the cost is immense. So to replace a home, an older home today, 1,000 square feet, versus a newer home after 1940, 1,000 square feet, the replacement cost is a lot different. So those things are big factors in determining how much do we need to replace this home at. Okay.
And this all factors into how much you should actually have in your homeowner's insurance.
That's right.
Okay?
And that's the most important part of it. That's coverage A. We didn't even get to the rest of the coverage, but that's one of 40. And I'll give you some other things that go into this. How many bathrooms? Okay. What's the quality of the bathroom? Are the bathrooms tiled? Are the bathrooms are they just drywall and painted?
Are they full or half?
Right? Are they half? Are they full? Are they 3/4? What's the quality? And we use 3 different qualities: basic, average, custom. Actually, there's 4 because you can get semi-custom. Kitchen. Same thing: basic, average, custom, semi-custom. That all determines the replacement cost of the kitchen. You can put a new kitchen in your home for $5,000, and you can put a new kitchen in your home for $100,000.
So when you make an adjustment to your home in any way, that means you should take out your homeowner's insurance and again upgrade it.
And talk to your agent.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And talk to your agent. Put the numbers into the calculator. Did you put an addition on the house? Did you finish something? Has something changed? Have you put a new roof on? That makes a factor. That's part of your structure.
What if some people like to do they like to buy a storage unit not attached to the house but on their property?
That's another coverage. Again, that's the second coverage we're going to talk about. But the dwelling part, I just want to make sure everybody understands that everything is a factor. The type of heat you have, anything you could think of that would affect the price of the
If you have
house.
air conditioning units.
If you have air conditioning, it will do it. That's part of the structure.
Right.
Okay? All determined. So now you can see where you can go from your neighbor has a replacement cost, house the same size.
And plumbing
Neighbor's
too,
got
because they do plumbing
125.
different.
Absolutely.
Yep, the different kind of tubes that they use for the
Absolutely.
plumbing.
Anything that you can think of. Your neighbor, same size house, his replacement cost is $125,000. Yours, you just did all these new things. Yours is $300,000. Why? Quality of the material, what it'll cost to replace it. So keep in mind, there's a huge difference in what it could be between yours
So
and your
put a
neighbor's.
star by dwelling if you're following along at home.
Absolutely. Now let's go to other structures.
All right.
That's a good. You led right into that. That's
Right.
perfect. Typical homeowners policy, other structures is 10% of the dwelling.
Okay.
So if you have 300,000 on your dwelling, your automatic coverage normally is 30,000.
Okay.
Okay? Could be more, but usually it's 10%. And one of the most frequent asked questions is, why do I have to pay for other structures when I don't have any? Well, you're not paying for it. It's an automatic at 10% on ours.
Okay.
Many other companies, same way. This is pretty much a standard.
So if you,
in the industry.
what is another other structure? As you can have a detached garage, right?
Anything not attached to the home would be the first thing you think about.
Okay. But would a
Anything not
swing
attached.
set be a part of that for other structure?
Normally that's considered
Would a
contents. A pool, perfect. Swimming pool, other structures, perfect. A shed, a fence, okay? Things like that, not attached to the house, they're considered other structures. 10%. Now, you should evaluate that because people build garages. We have garages in Hazleton that are worth more than the structure.
Right.
Look at that. Make sure what you put into it, you're able to get out of it.
Right.
Other structures is a real important.
Would a fountain be other structure if you have like a huge fountain?
If it
or is
was
that
built and permanent,
okay?
okay?
Built and permanent.
Permanent, okay? That would be considered another structure. Some companies consider even not permanent, depending on,
But
on
ask.
how big it is.
So anything on your property, you need to ask.
Always ask. That's
Okay.
other structures. Now, we're pretty much leading now into personal property. And I think that's great. This would be a great segue to, go out for a break.
Okay.
And when we come back, we're going to talk about personal property and the rest of the coverages on your homeowner's policy.
Yeah, what if someone falls in your home? Are you liable for that? Does your homeowner's insurance cover? We're going to talk about that. You're watching Know Your Insurance right here on SSP TV. Welcome back. You're watching Know Your Insurance right here on SSP TV. We're here at Allstate with Gary McNealis. 2 locations, one in Tamaqua, one right in Hazleton, and we're happy to serve all of Schuylkill County and our friends here in Lower Luzerne counties. So thanks for watching us here on SSP TV. We're informing you about homeowners insurance, the importance and the breakdown of what you should have to insure your home and your property. Now, before the break, we were talking about this calculator and the dwelling of some things you should know about your homeowner's insurance. So what is this calculator? Can people get this calculator? Do they have to come to their agent to get this calculator? Because this is something I think where people would question, my house or my property is worth more than this equation
Great question.
is coming into play.
It's
right?
a great question. The Marshall Swift Beck calculator is usually given an insurance company uses their formula. We plug it into our calculator, all that information. We plug all that information in, and that helps us determine the replacement cost. Now, could one company be different than the others? Absolutely. It doesn't mean that everybody's going to be exactly the same. It just, maybe one company puts emphasis on one thing versus another, like roof quality or bathroom quality or whatever.
So they take those 40 questions, they put it into a calculation under their equation, and then you put it into yours.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, we left off on personal property.
Yeah, great. This is a great area to talk about because we get a lot of questions on this. Personal property, anything unattached. Okay.
Right.
Now I say that, there are exceptions to the rules, but I would say use, in basic thought, anything unattached. Okay.
If you're adding
what is
something,
that?
again, make sure that that's an adjustment you need to make with calling your agent.
Exactly. Typically, personal property is a percentage of coverage A.
Okay.
Coverage A that's always the base formula. Coverage A. You see percentages, 50%, 70%. It depends on the company, depends on the company's formula, but personal property is usually a percentage. Okay? And what does it include? It includes furniture. It includes televisions. It includes anything unattached. It includes
Furniture
curtains,
outside, you're talking about?
furniture outside,
Okay.
furniture in the house. That's
Okay.
not considered part of the structure. That's considered personal property.
All right.
Anything you think of.
A piano?
A piano, perfect, okay? And some of these that you're mentioning, like piano, may need special coverage for musical instruments.
Okay.
Okay, depending on
So anything
the
of value.
Well, when you say anything of value, most
Anything
people.
that's of value to you.
Yeah, I mean, if your house, God forbid, burnt to the ground tomorrow, think about what it is they'd have to replace. And I mean, I could remember going into a home with an adjuster. By the way, it's a different adjuster that adjusts all the personal property. It's not the same, usually the same person that comes out and does the structure. But they even go to say, okay, what's on this wall? When you walk in your bedroom, what's on this wall? Okay, there's a chest of drawers. What's in this first drawer? Okay, you keep your underwear in there. How many pair of underwear do you think you have?
God.
Okay, absolutely.
They ask you?
Yeah, absolutely. How many pair do you think you had? Maybe you're above average. Well, you know what? Then, you should be made whole. Based on the replacement cost of whatever you have, okay? And I'm being, I know it sounds like I'm going to extremes, but what was in the drawers?
So know what's in your home.
Yeah, know what's in the drawers. And we're going to talk about that too. How do I determine that? How can I, prevent having a loss there? There's a lot of neat ways that you can do that. But anything unattached is considered personal property. Now, there are some cautions, okay? The biggest caution are valuables, and you mentioned that. Jewelry, fine arts, wow, print, paintings. You mentioned that.
Sculptures.
Absolutely. Those are things that have significant value. They can be singled out. And when you single them out, that means the replacement cost will be based on when I say it's full replacement value. The word replacement is very, very important because people can insure a diamond ring, and we see this a lot. My diamond ring has a value of $30,000, but it can be replaced for $15,000. Insurance companies replace. Current replacement.
That would include like baseball cards or something you've gotten from.
Well, yeah, and
something
baseball
signed.
cards, that's a touchy subject because collectibles are limited even under special articles coverage. There's limits to what they will insure, with collectibles.
Is that the same thing with like a coin collection or
same
figurines?
thing with a coin collection. Yes, I would say, what I always do is what's the best way. I always try to determine what's the best way to insure it. A person with baseball cards, our limits on our policy are too limited. So maybe you need to get a collector's type of policy, and there are some out there at low cost that you can pick up. But the jewelry, don't mess with the jewelry. Don't mess with the valuable musical instruments, guitars. I have a young guy who collects guitars. And that's everything. I mean, he loves his guitars, and he might buy one $4,000, like it's nothing. But that's what he loves.
So anything that's valuable to you.
Protect it. Absolutely.
All right, we're running out of time, so let's move along.
Yep. Additional living expenses is the next one.
Okay.
And that's coverage you have that if your home cannot, you cannot live in your home, you have to go out there and get additional living somewhere else. That pays for the cost of living somewhere else, the difference in the cost of what it would cost to eat, and things like that.
Yourself,
anything that would be the
essentials.
difference, absolutely.
Okay.
Like, for example, God forbid, your house is uninhabitable for whatever reason, and it's a covered peril. Must be a covered peril. So
Would it be like water damage? Would that count or not?
if it's covered.
A flood.
If it's covered. If flood is covered, if you have a flood policy, okay? Now, again, you mentioned flood. That's going to be another subject in itself, but additional living expenses provide coverage for if your house is uninhabitable to a covered peril.
Okay.
Typically fire is one,
Right.
water damage from the fire.
Right.
Now
Smoke
you
damage.
can't smoke damage. You can't live there. You have to go get it. You have to go live in a hotel or live in additional quarters. So what it's really designed to do is cover the difference in what it would cost you to live elsewhere. Difference in the cost of the food. Now you got to eat out every night.
Right.
How much difference is that? Difference, not the whole amount. How much is the difference? How much does it cost you to pay for for all your accommodations? Difference. That's an additional living expense. There are percentages that typically cover there. Make sure you have a policy that covers you at a good rate on additional living expense.
That's why we have you. My agent, I say,
Absolutely.
you know your lifestyle. You tell them what's in your house, what's out of your house.
Absolutely.
You ask the questions, and then you give us the
Absolutely.
coverage. All right. So I talked before the break that we were going to talk about what if this liability issue comes into play. You have, we talked about having Halloweeners at our house, or someone having a party at our house, and someone trips and falls and actually gets hurt on your property. Are you covered by your homeowner's insurance?
Okay. Perfect question. Liability is coverage due to your negligence.
Okay. Your
Yeah,
negligence.
due to your negligence. People can sue you for many, many different reasons. That's one thing we don't do as insurance agents is practice law and say,
Right.
I'm a lawyer, I could tell you. But negligence is usually the key in liability. And I would say to anyone out there, if you think that liability is a secondary coverage or unimportant, think again, because this is where you can lose everything. If you have a pension, if you have money in the bank, if you have assets, just the assets you're talking about in your home, you need to protect them, because above and beyond, you can be sued for any amount of money, not just what you have in your
Right.
homeowner's policy. And many people say, I got $100,000, that's plenty. What are you protecting? And that's a big question. Sit down with your agent, go over what it is you're looking to protect. Make sure that in the end you have ultimate peace of mind. This is the one I always use. An uninvited guest can sue you. It's Halloween. You do not have your light on, so you're not accepting trick-or-treaters.
Right.
Kids come up the steps, knock on your door, you're not home, they fall down. One kid falls down the steps. Can you be sued? Only the courts could determine that. But if there's negligence, for example, a rail's missing, a step is broken, can you be sued? An uninvited guest can sue you. Be careful. This is a great way to end the show because liability is a huge issue, something we can cover a little bit further down the road. There's guest medical that's attached to liability. There's other coverages on a homeowner policy we can talk about, but liability is an extreme important coverage.
Okay. On the next show, we are going to stick with homeowners insurance because what do you look for, right, is what we're going to be discussing.
What do you look for in a homeowner policy? Absolutely.
All right. Thanks for joining us here on SSP TV. Again, you're watching Know Your Insurance. We're here with Gary McNealis at Allstate. 2 locations, one here in Hazleton and the other in the Tamaqua area. We'll see you next time.